Hi, this video is addressed to the youth of Canada who are suffering from the sky-high housing prices. This is July 2021 and in Canada from coast to coast, and I mean from British Columbia to Newfoundland and Labrador, housing market and our agricultural land is on fire, being bought by foreigners left and right. I made the first video on it in March 2021, that is 4 months ago. And since then, the entire Canadian housing market is up by 20%. Canadians have been totally priced out of the housing market as it has been cornered by the foreign investors, aka mainland Chinese investors. Canadian families have been reduced to tears, and this has been going on for the last 20 years. Ask anyone living in Vancouver. But lately, no corner of Canada has been spared. And when I say suffering Canadian families, I mean all ethnicities. That includes my Chinese Canadian brothers and sisters who live here and work here as well. As I speak, our CMP is getting 500 complaints each day from Chinese Canadians that on refusal to work for the CCP agents in Canada, their families and friends are being harassed in China by Chinese government. Let me explain current Canadian housing issue with an example. Just like a multi-billionaire man can pick a much younger supermodel bride to marry with, and supermodel would most likely say yes because of all those billions. In our housing market, rich mainland Chinese investors are the billionaires. Our houses and land are the supermodels, and there is dating service to connect them, which is played by combination of our government, banks, and some real estate agents. I compare them to pimps, especially the government, and that too of lowest category. A pimp pimps others to make money. Our government is pimping their own, i.e. Canadians, to make money. For example, if a pimp runs out of outside girls to pimp, in desperation, it starts pimping its own family members. And that is exactly what the Canadian government is doing to Canadians. Consider this: $1 trillion are waiting in China to buy out Canada. All they need is a house on sale, or agricultural land on sale, or a copper gold silver mine on sale, or a fertilizer company on sale, or a farm land on sale, and they're ready with the cash to buy it. So interest rates going up or not, housing supply going up or not, a recession or an economic boom, these things don't matter to them. Today I'm going to break some myths, aka fiction, that they peddle us over media to convince us that everything is normal. Nothing to see here, problem is with you, not with us. Too bad you are born at the wrong time. Father's Day passed not too long ago, and this video is dedicated to my kids as my little attempt to fight back with the forces that are hell-bent to make them homeless. And it's also dedicated to all the Canadian kids who are in similar situation and whose dads do not have time to do this. First, let's talk about real estate industry. For the past 2 decades, real estate industry, I mean real estate agents, not the builders, is catering to the needs of foreign investors. These days, 90% of all real estate agents are of one ethnic background, which is not a problem but is a proof that all the buyers are mainland Chinese citizens. Myth: to hide this plain sight observation, real estate industry says the problem is housing shortage. Government should release more land for housing. Reality is, while this is a problem in itself, compounded by government's immigration policy without planning for more housing, schools, hospitals, government services, etc., it is not core of the problem. What explains sudden spikes of 20% or more in house prices in an area in just 2 months? Did population suddenly increase by 20% in 2 months? So, what is in it for the real estate agents? Well, how about a fat $40,000 in 1 week for selling a $1 million house, as the house sells by itself in the very first open house by multiple biddings, 20% over asking price. And it's not honest money at this point of time. It's a cut from the international money laundering scheme. And the others getting a cut are Canadian banks and our government. Speaking of government, first thing, government means a governing body for a country, and its primary purpose is to serve its people with honesty and fairness. Government is of, by, and for the people. But our government is acting more like a parasite whose host is you and me. And the parasite is getting bigger, so needs more nutrients to feed itself. That explains forever increasing taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, carbon taxes, property taxes, gas taxes, transit taxes, estate taxes, taxes on taxes, and any other tax they can think of. Taxes never go down, they only go up, and new taxes are added constantly. And they try to convince us that it's for our own good. Myth. Government says foreign ownership is only 3%. This gives the impression that foreign investment is a minor factor. This is a fraud on the part of the government to mislead its own citizens. Reality is, if a house is listed for $1 million in a neighborhood and a foreign investor outbids everyone to 1.2 millions, the entire house prices are jacked up to 1.2 million overnight. This becomes a new floor on the prices in that area. It impacts the neighboring area, then the neighboring city, then the neighboring province, like cancer. It spreads everywhere. Right now, it has spread to all the provinces, be it cities, suburban areas, or agricultural land. So all it needs is a few foreign investors to buy some houses here and there, and the market gets turned on its head. And that is what precisely has happened in the past 20 years, non-stop, and no end is in sight. Myth. Put more tax on foreign buyers, or measures like empty house tax to deter foreign buying. Reality. Foreign investors will happily pay additional tax since the price of a condo in places like Beijing, Shanghai is a few $1 million, and it doesn't include any land. In Canada, with the price of one condo in Beijing, they can buy a big house with land along with fresh air and water, which is elusive in Canada. Mind it, they are wearing face masks for 20 years in Beijing because of pollution. So for them, it's a very cheap deal from their perspective. This additional tax absolutely doesn't change anything for the Canadians. It only fills government's coffers so that they can keep funding their own fat salaries, annual raises, and pensions, and make it look like Canada is doing fine, whereas in reality, they are doing fine. And if you are wondering why government at first denied foreign influence for many years, then pretended they do not have foreign ownership numbers for many years, then mislead us that it's only 3% for many years, now you know the reason. For their job security. And the latest charade by our government is 1% tax on foreign buyers. This is just to generate a headline. If government was serious, they would have slapped at least 100% tax. But hey, corrupt government won't shoot itself in the foot. They are smart enough to know how to preserve themselves and their own interests. Myth. We need to engineer soft landing in the housing bubble so economy does not take a hit. Reality is, when house prices went up 8-fold in some areas in the past 2 decades, all vested interests laughed all the way to their respective banks. And if there is a talk of it coming down just a little bit, it gives government goosebumps and they start talking about the economy. Truth is, they do not want to kill this cash cow, but are happily destroying Canadian families for generations to come, perhaps forever, unless we wake up now. Now let's talk about banks. Myth is Canadian banks who are in cahoots with Canadian government say prices are going up because of low mortgage rates. So they will tighten mortgage rules to help us. Reality is a Canadian job person cannot buy $1 or $2 million house even if mortgage is 0%. It will take them over 100 years to pay back with even 0% rate. So that is another misleading act by banks/government. House prices have constantly gone up for the past 2 decades, regardless of mortgage rate being 1% or 5%, and regardless of great housing crash in the world in 2007-2008. There's only one factor: foreign investors, like one trick pony, except this pony is tricking all Canadians who are not part of the housing cartel. And by the way, tightening mortgage rules will only result in foreigners buying our housing without competing with local buyers, i.e., even cheaper from their perspective. It still won't benefit us. There's only one way to end this cancer of sky high Canadian housing market: ban foreign investors from buying our houses. Fact is, Chinese government law allows Chinese citizens to take only $50,000 in a year outside of their country, that too for educational or tourism purposes only. But they are routinely able to take millions of dollars out. Obviously, it involves Chinese side of bank and a Canadian side of bank. The house seller receives payment from the Canadian side bank. So all Canadian banks are involved in it and they benefit from it big time. Just in case you were wondering why they close one eye and always justify the rising prices. Last piece of puzzle is house owners. The myth is as the house price goes up, house owners' equity goes up. Reality is house prices always go up because of inflation and population growth, while the land remains the same. So house owners always benefit, which they should as they worked hard to save money and pay for it. We are talking here about abnormal rise in prices. As prices suddenly go up, house owners feel good. Look at their annual assessments. But then comes the property tax bill, which is increased proportionately. Whereas one dies eventually and cannot take house and equity with them, they are stuck paying elevated property taxes for the rest of their lives. Some people want to upgrade to a bigger house as the family grows, but it becomes very risky to sell house and then buy the bigger one. Who knows what will happen to the housing market in the next few months? Now, current house owners may feel good about rising house prices, but the next generation is screwed. The next generation may choose to not have a family because of housing problems. This will end current house owners' bloodline and no grandchildren. The next generation will live under depression because of high rents and uncertainty. Is this what you want to give to your next generation? Thanks for listening.